Good evening, everyone. It's now 7 p.m., so we will call this meeting to order, a regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission of Wednesday, May 14th, 2025. And we will start with the land acknowledgement. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lijon. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. And with that, we can go to roll call.
Yes, Commissioner Moman.
Here.
Commissioner Pearson.
Here.
Commissioner Pilch.
Present.
Commissioner Waddy.
Here.
And Chair McLeod.
Here. We'll move on to item 2, ex parte communications. We don't really have any design projects, so I don't think there would be any. Next item, item 3, consent calendar, approval of minutes, April 23rd, 2025. Is there anyone who would like to pull this from the consent calendar?
Motion to approve?
I'll second.
And we'll go to a vote. Commissioner Moman? Commissioner Pearson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pilch?
Yes.
Commissioner Waddy?
Aye.
And I vote yes as well. And with that, we will move on to item 4, public comments. For persons desiring to address the commission on an item that is not on the agenda, please note that policy limits each speaker to 3 minutes. So if there's anyone in the room that would like to speak, and we can check online after that. So you'll have 3 minutes.
Good evening. I am Dr. Stephen Alpert. I and over a dozen individuals have requested that the council justify why Albany follows only the minimum state mandate, notifying those within 300 feet of new construction, regardless of project size, when in fact for years, other California cities have used wider and varied notification to distinguish between small and large-scale projects. The practice of only notifying those within 300 feet clearly limits public discourse, allowing this commission to propose and the council to then push through new projects, no matter how inappropriate, with minimal awareness and input from the public. Such was the case for the oversized 5-story modern box proposed for 1600 Solano Avenue. Only 73 properties were alerted by postcards mailed 10 days before the first planning and zoning hearing. By approving the plans for this project as submitted, this commission and the council violated every aspect of Albany's planning and zoning mission statement, which reads, "The purpose of design reviews to ensure that designs of projects are visually and functionally appropriate to their site and harmonious with their surroundings." Clearly, anyone can see that the plans for 1600 Solano are not visually and functionally appropriate or harmonious with the adjacent Craftsman-era buildings. I reviewed the videos of the January 26, 2022 study session and the subsequent April 27th meeting devoted to 1600 Solano. Commission members had extensive concerns and lengthy discussions about the building's bike storage, but not a single one commented that the modern design proposed was inappropriate for that site. Density bonus was cited as the reason the plans for the 5-story mixed commercial residential structure at 1600 Solano with no setback and no parking had to be approved as submitted. While density bonus allows for higher building heights, reduced setback, and less parking, density bonus does not override enforcement of local building ordinances. Assuming, and that's a major assumption, that density bonus obligated the city to approve a 5-story structure with no setback and no parking at 1600 Solano, at the very least, this commission should have insisted that the building incorporate craftsman-style features to be compatible with the neighborhood. Why bother to post a mission statement if you're simply going to ignore it? As directed by the council, commission members are obligated to follow 300 feet notice for new construction. But why did 4 sitting members of this commission feel entitled to ignore and violate every aspect of Albany's planning and zoning mission statement and the general plan. Albany deserves better, much better from this commission. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Which you'll ignore.
Is there anyone who would like to comment online for public comment?
No.
No. Okay. Well, then we'll move on to item 5.1, study session on potential amendments to bike parking regulations. So we will start.
Yes,
the
I would
staff
like-
presentation.
Yes, I'd like to first introduce my colleague, Ben Matlaw, who is an associate planner in the Community Development Department in Transportation Planning.
Good evening. Give me 1 second here. All right. Thank you, commissioners, for having me. I am going to talk to you tonight about what sounds like a much anticipated topic of conversation, bike parking in the city. And I'm going to kind of run through kind of three pieces of this conversation tonight, which is, one is to start by kind of understanding why we're talking about bike parking policy changes. Two is just reviewing the existing regulations and best practices both in Albany and in nearby cities. And then three, kind of pose some questions that you probably saw in the staff memo about this to engender conversation. So, we're not recommending anything tonight. This is really just the starting point to a conversation that will hopefully lead to an update in the ordinance and also relevant policies in the city. So why develop bike parking regulations at all? This is to establish kind of a standard of quantity, design, and placement for these spaces to ensure security, weather protection, and integration with urban space, to ensure convenience and accessibility for folks biking and using micro-mobility devices, and to reduce sidewalk clutter, prevent theft, and encourage biking in general. Why do it now? I know you all talked a little bit in previous commission meetings about AB 2097 and the elimination of car parking minimums near transit, which allowed for the city to eliminate car parking minimums in general throughout the city. So this is kind of a conversation to follow up on that policy change, but also we have an active transportation plan going through the process right now that may set policy standards, additional policy standards, and we have a climate action plan from a few years ago that set goals for reduction in vehicle miles traveled and GHG emissions, et cetera. So this is all relevant to that. Also, we have to adapt to changing transportation trends. So with the increased popularity of e-bikes, cargo bikes, and other micromobility devices, it makes sense to start to think about how the policy and regulations of the city might change as they pertain to the parking of those devices. Just to kind of set the stage here and define some terms, active transportation is really a human-powered movement, a form of movement. So, walking, biking, scooters that are not electric, skateboards, wheelchairs, that sort of thing. Micromobility, when we talk about that, these are usually electric devices. And can include anything like e-bikes, manual or electric scooters, other compact electric devices like electric unicycles, that sort of thing. Bike infrastructure involves anything that is infrastructure related that improves the facilitation and use of bicycles in the city. So that can include parking or also bike lanes and paths. Transportation demand management is kind of the practice of setting policies aimed at reducing the reliance on single occupancy vehicles by encouraging other transportation options. And then short-term bike parking is just, the bike parking that you have, often for very quick stops. Long-term parking is secure and weather-protected facilities. Public bike parking is parking in public space, and private parking is in, private facilities, kind of restricted access for tenants, employees, customers, et cetera. So shifting gears to the city's bike parking ordinance and those of nearby cities. So in the city of Albany, currently, we have an ordinance that mandates one short-term parking space per 1,500 square feet of residential mixed-use space, and one long-term bike parking space per unit. And then for commercial spaces, we mandate one short-term space per 1,500 square feet, and we do not have a mandate for long-term commercial bike parking. Just in terms of the applicability of the ordinance, this is for new commercial mixed use and multifamily spaces. And there's some general requirements that we won't get into the details of, but just making sure that the bikes are safe and secure. And Solano and San Pablo have some special rules. The San Pablo specific plan kind of ups the ante for bike parking and recommends 20 feet of residential spaces accommodate large bicycles. So those being something more akin to cargo bikes. The definition is at least 10. Do not require lifting and are at least 10 feet long. 20% of residential spaces would require electrical sockets to accommodate e-bikes, and then the sockets must be accessible to horizontal bike parking spaces. And then residential bike rooms provided have to be at grade, ground level, and provide access to the street or sidewalk. This was also in your memo, but this is just a little bit of a kind of high-level comparison of the various cities, several cities in the East Bay, just to give folks an understanding of how bike parking is mandated in the other cities and the way that they do it. So there's a lot of variance between the different cities in terms of whether it's mandated per unit, per bedroom, per square foot, per car parking space, et cetera. And so there's no right or perfect way to do this, but there are different considerations to make. We did not include San Francisco here because it's kind of an overly complicated, and there's just a lot more nuance to fit into a simple chart, but we can talk about San Francisco's bike parking ordinance too, if that is what the commission desires. So just general considerations when thinking about bike parking regulations. Generally, we want to think about the number of spaces required, the types of spaces required. We just talked about kind of cargo bikes and e-bikes, but there's also other micromobility devices that we might consider, and then the location of spaces and the convenience and access to those spaces. I think we can get into best practices a little bit more, but really there's an interest in prioritizing accessibility, setting clear standards, ensuring security and weather protection, integrating with other transportation modes, supporting both short and long-term parking, promoting equity, especially geographic equity, thinking about what is enforced versus incentivized, and not overcomplicating the process or the regulations. And to this point, I would just, highlight the fact that Portland, Oregon in 2023 actually voted to roll back its citywide bike parking requirements because they were deemed overly cumbersome for developers when the city was trying to spur housing development. So always keeping that in the back of our head is how will this regulation potentially impede other goals of the city. So that's a very brief presentation on bike parking ordinances and regulations. And I'll just kind of move us towards the discussion questions that we want to open this up to the commission to discuss. Those being, how well do the city's current bike parking standards meet the needs of today's cyclists and micromobility users, and where are the gaps? Some of these questions may require more information that you ask of us to provide in the future, but just to spur conversation here, how can Albany's regulations better accommodate diverse bike types and evolving mobility trends? Should bike parking requirements be integrated into a broader TDM strategy? What barriers might the city face in implementing updated standards? And what strategies could help ensure successful adoption and compliance? And are there other factors that should be considered when updating the regulations? And with that, happy to answer any questions, but also happier to hear an open discussion about this.
All right, thank you very much for the presentation. Why don't we just start with any questions for Ben right now about anything?
I have a question. So I started in the commission in January, so my question has more to do with like where you are in the process. Are you just talking to us, or have you done community engagement? Yeah, that's my question.
This is the very first step in the process.
Okay, got it. And are you here because this body asked you to come speak, or is it a priority of the city, or what are the strategic, priority?
It was because the body asked us to speak.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Moman?
I have a question about the objective of this in addition to the typical processes. Are we going to focus our discussion only to the standards for the bike parking in ordinance, or we aim to improve the overall bike parking scenario in the city that includes parking provided by the private property owners as well as the city?
It's my understanding that we are exclusively, in terms of an ordinance, the ordinance would affect private property only.
Okay.
So the public realm, we could make recommendations on, but those would be subject to approval by other bodies.
Okay, so that is separate from whatever. We can suggest ideas, but it has to be separate. Because, it is integrated basically, a lot of issues that we face today, are not just related to private property owners and parking provided there.
I think the conversation can be about both, and we should have the conversation about both, but any ordinance would be about private property exclusively.
Got it, okay. And just for my information, are there any plans for improvement in bike infrastructure in the city, like any immediate plans?
Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
So are there any, is city contemplating any improvements in the bike infrastructure in the city?
So, shameless plug. The active transportation plan is currently in development. This is a new active transportation plan for the city. And we are currently in the second phase of a 3-phase process. There will be a Tuesday, May 20th open house meeting discussing the active transportation plan and the progress that's been made. This will be focused on the network development of the bicycle and pedestrian networks throughout the city, and that's going to happen on Tuesday, May 20th, so in just under a week at the community center at 5:30, between 5:30 and 7:30 p.m.
And that would also cover bike parking?
We will not be addressing bike parking at
Okay.
that open house, but
No, but in the study that you are
the plan will
undertaking.
address bicycle policies, bicycle and pedestrian policies, and bike parking is a policy that would likely come out of that.
Okay. And any plans for transit demand management? Like, our municipal code mentions transit demand management in just one paragraph. There is not like a, comprehensive strategy. And considering that minimum parking requirement is eliminated, there are some implications of that on traffic demand management. So what is your, what does city think about that? Do we need that, or?
Per question 3, I think we're open to having that conversation, and this as part of a larger TDM strategy. But that would probably come as guidance from you as the commission.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, just one question. When you mentioned the Portland issue, do they have any minimum car parking requirements? Do you know?
It's a great question. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Waddy, any questions? No? I was just going to ask myself, how do you see this process working? What kind of outline do we have? This is day 1, first session, but where do we go from here, and how do you see that moving forward? Some cities do a lot. I think Portland had a 140-page bike parking document that they went through for I don't know how long, but I don't want it to be that complicated. I think it can be a lot simpler, but what do you see as our...
So I think I'm going to answer this one. So what we see is going to be largely determined about what we hear from you all tonight. So you can see that the study session's pretty wide open because we wanted to hear from you before we kind of dove deeper into, that's the royal we, before Ben dove deeper into doing research. So we want to hear from you. What we get back here, I can see following up with more research and more presentation and more options, kind of a more fine-tuned study session, unless we get super specific information tonight, which we could then potentially come back with the actual draft ordinance. I also see that I would like to talk about bicycle regulations. I think it's important to have an ordinance for standards. However, if we're doing TDM or guidelines in terms of spacing or amount, I think that should be accompanied as part of a resolution, so that it would have more flexibility to be updated. So when we talk about it, we may use ordinance, but I'd like to, what we're hoping to hear is more of a bike policy regulations that could expand. And like I said, it's really going to be based on the detail in terms of timing. We do hope to get back to you before the August recess, if all goes well, just for whatever that next stage is, and then keep moving forward to eventually getting draft ordinances and potentially regulations for your recommendation then onto council.
Okay, great. Another question. We don't currently have any ordinances for temporary events, do we? Bike parking events? Bike parking for
Not-
one time or recurring temporary events? Nothing.
That is correct, and we've been including that as part of the conditions of the temporary use permit.
But nothing,
Nothing codified, correct.
okay. So we can require it, but then it's not, there's no real guidelines for them to follow beyond our suggestions or our, yeah, nothing for them to refer to really when they're doing these events.
At this time, correct. It might be provide a bike corral or provide 5 spaces, but not dimensions or location or,
Types of racks, et cetera, okay. And then just going back to Portland, you said they repealed their ordinance, or they scaled it back. Where were they and where did they go back to? I mean, I'm just curious to know why it was so cumbersome or what the problem was.
Yeah, I should have the information in front of me. As I recall, there were three kind of pieces of the ordinance that they repealed. One was there was like a high minimum number that they scaled back, but there were also very kind of prescriptive details to, how bikes would, spacing and that sort of thing. So that just made it exceedingly difficult for developers to implement when they were developing housing. Let me put a pin in that and get back to you.
Okay, that'll be interesting to know. Okay, I don't have any other questions, so why don't we open it up to public comment? And we have one person in the room who looks like he would be a commenter.
I walked quickly here. If there's anybody online, I'd be happy to have them go first.
Okay. That's okay, we'll start online.
Yeah, if there's anyone online who'd like to speak on this matter, please raise your hand.
Hi, my name's Catherine, and I'm an avid bicyclist in Albany, also pedestrian. I also have a car. I like bicycling because it's a way for me to get places more conveniently, have great parking, and want to share the study from bikeportland.org that bike visitors spend more money per month per convenience store, for example, compared to car owners. Bunch of ideas related to bike parking. I like the idea of keeping it simple and having recommendations rather than requirements because we don't want to get in the way of more housing, for example. A couple of ideas. Bike parking should be inclusive of dedicated spaces for larger size, longer family bikes and cargo e-bikes that allow people to have more options for getting groceries and running errands. Cars are very expensive by comparison. Bikes that carry groceries or kids or other things that are heavy can often be sold on bike racks that are vertical, and seniors and people with disabilities can bike, but also can't lift bikes vertically. So having racks to allow for rolling in and out is more accessible and equitable. As you can hear, some strong feedback here from another kid about bikes. State law requiring daylighting 25 feet from intersections near stop signs are places that could be designed to provide parking for family-sized bikes rather than just empty pavement. Having locked rooms are really helpful, but not being visible to outside of a building is relevant because being able to have secure bike parking is key to being able to have people feeling comfortable doing more biking. And then bike racks also should be functional and not just art pieces because having it be too pretty can be an obstacle to having it be functional, and having functionality and security is really important for actually using this. So for example, racks that are bolted into concrete can be removed easily compared to racks installed in fresh concrete are harder to remove for theft. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your comments.
Yes, good evening. My name's Lucinda Young, and I am an Albany resident, a longtime resident. I'm also a member of the Albany Climate Action Coalition. My primary form of transportation is by bicycle, although I also do own a car and drive a car, although I do try to predominantly travel by bicycle to the extent that I'm able to. The two primary barriers to cycling, I find, is number one, safe routes, which I know is not before this committee this evening. But number two is a safe, secure place to park your bicycle. Many people are concerned about bicycle thefts, and I think everyone here is probably aware of the huge problem we have with bicycle thefts, and that can only be addressed through safe vehicle parking. I want to mention that under the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, that calls for a 20% reduction in, it's either 20 or 25% reduction in vehicle miles traveled. A big part of accomplishing that reduction is increasing bicycle and pedestrian transportation. And the only way that's going to happen is by safe routes and safe parking access. I also want to remind the committee that last year, the City of Albany City Council passed a climate emergency declaration, which directed all decisions made by the city should be made through the lens of the climate emergency. So I would ask that that also be considered in your decisions this evening. I just want to, as a cyclist, I often deal with trying to find a secure place to park my bike, and there's a huge difference in the racks. I don't want to get too technical here, but I believe they're called grid bike racks. I see those all over the place, and they're not secure to use. It's very hard to get a U-lock on one of those. The inverted U-locks, racks, inverted U-locks, and the wave style bike racks work really well. I think it's also, I want to echo what the previous speaker spoke about. It's very important that cargo bikes, that the racks be able to accommodate cargo bikes. But I would fully support making sure that there is bike access. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
If anyone else wishes to speak online, please use the raise the hand icon. No one else online? You're up.
It's loose. Good evening, Commission. I'm Ken McCroskey. I'm a 15-year member of the Transportation Commission Albany and a active transportation advocate, speaking for myself, of course, this evening. You'll excuse me if I stop looking you in the eye and pay attention to the time monitor. I don't need to repeat what was said by the previous two callers. I support almost everything they said. Certainly, cementing in your bike racks is great when you can, but we have a lot of pavement out there and sidewalk already, so sometimes there's a compromise. And that can be okay, especially in a public place. I want to remind you that bikes are already here. When I go home from a commission meeting up Solano, I'm passing the dishwashers riding home on their crappy little bikes that they've stashed at the back of the restaurant. Bikes are all around us, and the more we can support people on bikes, the more we can get out of our cars. And as Lucinda noted, I think actually it's Catherine, spend more money because we're visiting more often, even if we spend a little less. Secured storage is key. Can you imagine driving your car to Safeway and taking your headlights in with you? We all do this when we go places on our bike, and it can work for errands. We can make it work. But if we're going to an appointment that's going to last several hours, the equation changes. If we're living somewhere or going to a hotel, we want to be able to park our bike securely and forget about it and go about our business. So I encourage you to consider the fact that there may be a hotel one day in Albany. Who knows? The devil is really in the details of secured parking. There are some straightforward options like the bike link boxes, which have proven very secure. They take up a lot of space. Bike rooms can be fantastic, but I've spoken to people who have experienced situations where their entire complex, everybody has access to the bike room, and there's no camera, there's no accountability. So if something happens, there's no accountability. You can imagine what happens. I would suggest that if there's a common bike area or areas that people gain access to that when they are using it. That could be hard to litigate or to put into code, I understand, but again, the devil's in the details. Even if you just have card key readers that identifies who goes in and out and a camera, even if you can't recognize them on the camera, you can figure out who was there. So think big, think about shared bike parking among businesses, maybe in a bike station. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. No one else? Then we will close public comment and move on to commissioner discussion and discussion with staff. I don't know if anyone has any questions for Mr. McCroskey, who has a lot of experience in this, but anyway, yeah, I'd like to start. I mean, I'm probably the catalyst for bringing this to the commission. It was the very first item I asked to have reviewed when I started 6 years ago, which seems like a very long time, and nothing was happening. But since then, we've adopted a specific plan for San Pablo Avenue. I think the climate emergency declaration is also another factor. But I think the fact that we've adopted a housing element, we have eliminated minimum parking standards for residential areas, I think is really the key. You know, as we go forward and we're encouraging building housing and we want to build more housing, and that housing could come with much less car parking than before. You know, I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that we want to provide alternatives so that people don't need cars, don't need to go about their daily business with vehicles, and create some sort of mode shift. There was a letter written by Mr. Martin, and he gets it exactly right when he said, you know, the more bicycle and micromobility infrastructure we have in Albany, the easier people will find they can live with fewer or no cars, thereby taking some stress off parking in our neighborhoods and satisfying our climate and other environmental goals, healthy lifestyle goals, et cetera. So I think it's really critical. We don't want to have a bunch of housing come along and then have a flood of cars on our streets. So this bike parking ordinance, updating our bike parking ordinance is a really key fundamental element to encouraging reduced car use and fewer cars. So I really support just doing as best a model ordinance as we can right now, really doing it right, and then not having to worry about it for 15 years or whatever until technology changes and some other thing comes along that we have to worry about. But I really, and I appreciate the presentation. I think we really absolutely have to recognize the paradigm shift created by the popularity and adoption of cargo bikes and other electric bikes that have more cargo carrying capacity, even if they aren't long-tail bikes. But that is fundamentally changing how people shop. It's fundamentally changing how people are going to get around town, parents and kids. You see them all over. Kids seem to be loving it. That is what we should be encouraging and providing infrastructure for. And that includes not just bike rooms, but on the street, protected bike lanes, as part of this nexus between housing, climate action, reducing vehicle miles traveled, all that sort of thing. So, I mean, there's this huge nexus here, and it's all interrelated. And the bike infrastructure is a key part, transit's a key part, more housing is a key part. It helps us reach our climate goals. So, you know, I just can't quite say enough about how important this is. And then I would refer also, it's very much related to the housing element. In fact, in our housing element, we have policy 4.9, car-free living. And I'll read it. It's coordinate housing initiatives with active transportation programs, car sharing programs, and parking initiatives so that it's easier to live in Albany without owning a private vehicle. Foregoing auto ownership can reduce household transportation expenses and create more disposable income for housing. So it's also an equity issue, much cheaper to live without a car. People shop locally, creates a better city, creates a better urban environment. So for me, there's really no reason not to promote it as much as we can and adopt a model ordinance. You know, I could say more. You know, researching the active transportation plan and the Solano Avenue discussion of last week, I came across a Caltrans Main Street document where, even Caltrans gets it. So I'm going to read this too. Main streets that support sustainable transportation systems encourage low carbon or carbon neutral travel options to reduce emissions and vehicle miles traveled, providing comfortable conditions for biking, walking, and taking public transit gives people the freedom to forego a motor vehicle trip when they choose, since many daily trips are 2 miles or less, creating infrastructure that supports non-motorized options, and I would stress infrastructure, of which bike rooms are infrastructure. Creating infrastructure that supports non-motorized options close to homes and main street locations is a powerful mechanism for achieving sustainability and climate-related goals. And I would also say it just makes our cities better, more resilient, friendlier, cleaner, less air pollution, et cetera. I have a lot of specific recommendations, but I could wait on those and let other people weigh in. And I'll hand it over to whoever else would like to speak.
And just to interject, I don't know when a good time to bring up the Portland, Oregon example is, but I do actually have a slide that I buried away that can answer that question. So whenever you want that information.
Okay, well, maybe we should hear from everyone first and then give us a little update on that. Anyone else like to speak?
Sure. Okay. I'll just mention a few things that come up. First, I'll say I agree with everything that the chair said. I agree with all the public commenters and those who sent in letters as well. Great comments from the public. Thank you to the public for that. And one member of the public mentioned something that I was going to mention, which is that parking your bicycle outside is like if you parked your car and left all the windows down and your hood up, or even if your car had no panels on it at all. Your bicycle is completely exposed. And for that reason, I think we should be thinking about, for long-term parking, individual parking for bicycles is the safest and most safest and gives the most confidence to the owner of the bicycle. The bike link lockers that are available at BART stations are a great example of that. You can feel very confident that you have your own space and no one's going to touch your bicycle. Something like that. I'm not necessarily recommending that we put that in the ordinance, but I wouldn't at all be. I would love it if we did. There are examples. I did live in an apartment building once where each apartment had its own storage locker. And so it might not be that much more difficult for an apartment building to build individual units for storage for the residents rather than having a bike room. I also worry about bike rooms for the same reason that a member of the public did. I've used bike rooms, public bike rooms, such as are provided at Berkeley, in downtown Berkeley, and inadvertently left a light on my bike, and it was stolen off of there. So, bike rooms definitely have their downsides. I do like it that I think Commissioner McLeod, Chair McLeod mentioned that someone asked whether we are going to have any standards for the public realm. I think we probably should apply the same standards, whatever standards we come up with, to all the city buildings, such as the building we're in now, community center, public works building. They should be probably subject to the same short-term commercial parking requirements that we come up with. So I'd like to see that. And in terms of the civic buildings, the public buildings, I think those ordinances should require that the city do it now and not in any new construction, since the city's not likely to do any more, construct any more buildings or do any more major renovations. I do like the idea of addressing temporary events, requiring bike parking at temporary events, such major examples being the Solano Stroll. If we ever had Foodie Land back out at the waterfront, I think we should just have it in our ordinance that these major public events have require bike parking. And finally, I'll just mention that the ordinances from the various cities, a couple more things. The ordinances from the various cities, including ours, mention per square foot, per bedroom, and per unit requirements. It seems to me maybe per square foot is the best, because it's a unit of housing is kind of a funny thing. A unit of housing can be a studio, or it can be a 3-bedroom or larger building. So focusing either on the number of bedrooms, or maybe, since bedrooms can vary in size as well, the square footage would be the appropriate thing. So if we're having requirements that, if we're having requirements for residential, I think they should probably be on square footage. But actually, I wanted to ask, I forgot to ask staff, Ben, have you seen any trends as far as what the cities are doing? Are they moving toward a particular, towards square footage or per bedroom or per unit, or you haven't really seen any trends?
The closest thing to a trend I could say I saw in my research was for residential, it was the requirements were typically per unit, and commercial was typically per square foot.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that per square foot for residential, or at least per bedroom, would be more appropriate, since a housing unit can vary greatly in size and greatly in number of people that can be accommodated in it. Finally, I'll say that Chair McLeod reached out to Bike East Bay, which has a lot of expertise in this area, and they've been following what cities are doing, and they have some preliminary guidelines that they're sharing with whoever wants them, and so those can be forwarded along, and I think that there's nothing that different in their requirements from what some of the other public commenters said, but there's maybe a little bit more detail in some areas, including a mention that there's a state law that permits tenants to store and recharge one micromobility device inside their apartment. But there's an exception if there is storage in the building for that. So that's something to note for residential requirements going forward. And I'll just leave it there for now. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I can go next.
Pearson.
So let's see. So first, I'll say that I've been a bike commuter for 30 years, so I am a bike advocate. With this, I'm struggling a little bit because I don't know what the challenges are for the City of Albany with our existing regulations. So when we talk about what are you trying to fix? What's the problem? And so from public comment, like, understand that there's some issues with the short-term parking, and so making sure that it's secure, that, it's, that it can accommodate these large bikes, like that seems that, that's important. I also like the point of the employee parking. The problem with that is that we can only apply these regulations to new construction. And so most of Solano, and I guess San Pablo, is built out, so we have to think about what do we want. We aren't necessarily going to solve the problem of existing employees or employee parking. So, thinking about new construction, how, what regulations are needed in order to accommodate future employees, future customers. And again, I go back to what are the regulations today for the city of Albany, and are they working? And so I would love to see more outreach or I'd love to see outreach to the community to understand what we're doing well and where we have room to grow. Yeah, I mean, I think, I love the idea of having shared parking. The TransLink and the bike station in the city of Berkeley is that's where I park every day. In Albany, it's a little bit harder because we don't have that downtown location where everybody's going. We don't have a BART station. So, where is the need? Is it at Safeway? I mean, that would be short-term parking, but I love the point about not having to carry your headlights into the supermarket, because that's my problem every morning. So yeah, I mean, I would love the idea of a bike station, TransLink, but where should it be? Where is the one place in Albany, or where are the 3 places in Albany that people need that? And I don't know the answer to that. I like hearing from Bike East Bay. Again, it's for the region, though. You're not going to hear about Albany-specific issues. Like in Berkeley, we have bedroom parking because we have a lot of student housing. And so we have 6 bedrooms per unit. So a unit doesn't work. Yeah, I have questions about how well we're doing today before we go and rewrite the ordinance. So that's it. Yeah, some sort of utilization study is what I would suggest. Thanks.
Other comments? Commissioner Moman?
Thank you for a great presentation. I agree with most of what you started with. I think it could be a great guide to move forward from here. I would echo what Commissioner Pearson just mentioned, and that's what I asked you the first question about what the city have in mind for the overall improvement of bike infrastructure. And so, we need to promote active transportation and bike parking. Good, secure bike parking is, I think, an important part of that, in addition to other infrastructure in terms of bike paths and all that. So understanding what we need currently, what are the challenges, I think is important, and most of that is, I think, related to short-term parking in public right-of-way, and most of that is provided by city. And so understanding that, I think, is important. And then with that, we could think about other short-term parking standards and requirements. And then about the future needs, most of those, as Commissioner Pearson also mentioned, would be provided or taken care of from private developments, future developments, large future developments. But that depends on how we develop and how the development goes in the city. And that is, again, more related to long-term parking. So I'm looking at this in 2 different areas. Long-term parking, more related to private properties, and short-term parking, more related to public right-of-way. And very short part of that would be, I think, provided by private property owners, and most of that, remaining part would be by the city. So overall, I think, considering that we have eliminated minimum parking requirement, we should increase bike parking provision, as much as possible. And in that, as I mentioned earlier, short-term parking is important. So in terms of just looking at the code ordinance, I would recommend or suggest increased requirement for all non-residential uses, not just some retail and commercial spaces, but all other uses that people can visit using bike. And also we can focus on certain zones in the city, particularly the main commercial spines, Solano Avenue and San Pablo. We should encourage property owners to provide short-term bike parking on site, and whatever we have in the public right-of-way should be as an additional capacity, and that we can improve further and make space for other bike parking related requirements in terms of diverse bike types and other micromobility devices. And we should develop better standards for those. And then I would also recommend short-term bike parking requirement for multifamily residential projects too, in addition to their long-term parking. And then for long-term parking, I think 1 per unit is reasonable. But since we have eliminated minimum parking requirement, I think we should use bike parking as a kind of a bargaining tool. Traditionally, transit demand management, used to do that. Like if developer wanted to reduce their car parking requirement, cities used to suggest higher bike parking provision. But now since we have removed minimum parking requirement, that age of transit demand management tool is kind of, not there. But we could use that as a kind of a normal standard. And so what I would suggest is linking bike parking provision with minimum off-street car parking requirement. And so we can have kind of a base bike parking requirement, which is 1 per unit. That would go with the maximum off-street car parking requirement. And then if any project wants to reduce their car parking requirement, then we can require them to have higher number of bike parking. So there could be some kind of a balance between that. There could be some kind of standard that links the car parking with bike parking in some way. Like if they want to reduce 20% car parking, then they should increase 20% bike or maybe more, something like that. And then we should also require some non-residential uses to provide long-term bike parking, like a lot of, as I think Mr. McCroskey mentioned, a lot of employees need parking, and if they have to, park somewhere in the nook and alley or, in insecure, space, then that is not helpful. Then let me open my document. And then, the quality of space that bike are provided, bike parking is provided, should also be taken into consideration. Typically, like bike, a lot of people call it bike storage. I would rather call it bike room, and a more active space should be provided for a bike room that can become a kind of a communal space rather than just a kind of a storage space in the corner that can be more active, and there should be provisions for security, cameras and all that, but it should be kind of a meeting space for the residents if it is for a larger multi-family project. And then we typically struggle to activate street frontage of the buildings when considering that retail doesn't work, or it is really difficult to make it successful. So bike rooms could be one use that can help activate the street frontage. And we should also keep a provision for a conversion of a bike room if in case it is proven that it is not being used to the intended level of intensity. So that if we are making the bike parking as a larger requirement and developers are spending, using their resources to provide large spaces, and if they are not used properly or efficiently, then there should be a way to convert those spaces back to some other usable spaces. And then we should also look at the standards. We should think about all different diverse modes of micromobility, like all different types of bikes and provision for them. But we need to be careful about that, like what impact it would do on the size of the space, and so proportion of those different bikes, like trailer bikes and long tail bikes and all that should be thought about. We have provided, I think, 20% proportion of those different types of bikes in San Pablo Avenue specific plan. So either we can continue with that. We don't have any way to assess whether that is successful or not, since we don't have any project built using those standards. And then we should also think about accessibility in terms of like.
Could you speak into the mic, please? I can't
sorry.
quite hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so we. No, is this better, or I have to? Yeah, when I'm trying to, look at my notes, then it is not loud enough. Yeah. So, and then in terms of like bike, racks and all that. So we should have some standards for that. There have been some observations like, some of those equipment are not easy for everyone to use. Yep, and then there is a huge increase in electric e-bikes, and so there should be some provision for charging of those bikes. Yeah, so that's all so far.
Commissioner Wadi, comments? No? Well, I have a list of things that I was looking at also. And I did correspond with Bike East Bay, and they're working on a set of model guidelines, but it's not finished yet. But the one thing I did notice for sure was they're recommending it's more per bedroom, one bike space per bedroom. It's sort of, you wonder about occupants. It's more about occupants, really. So, and even in a 2-bedroom apartment, you could have 2 parents, 2 kids, 4 people, 4 bikes, potentially. What I think is trying to make this kind of future-proof. It's not, and it's kind of like bike infrastructure. People say, oh, people don't bike on Solana, we don't need bike infrastructure on Solana. Well, that's not what's going to happen in the future. As you create new infrastructure, you get more biking, and we're encouraging that. We're encouraging mode shift. So I think we need to build in some future expansion into the bike parking, and I'm thinking mostly of multifamily. I think that's sort of the crux of the issue, crux of the ordinance for me is multifamily, new multifamily or remodeled multifamily. So we're going to have the biggest impact in terms of residents, potential car parking. We're trying to reduce car parking from those projects. So that's where I think the focus really should be. I appreciate the short-term parking considerations, and I do appreciate the idea of businesses providing parking for their employees instead of, saying, it's all somebody else's problem to solve. I think businesses should also be actively working on solving the parking problems in the city. So my recommendation would be to go to 1 space per bedroom. The idea of it being expandable for the future. The City of Davis has 1 space per bedroom. Granted, they're probably a very heavily student-centric city, kind of like Berkeley in many places. But again, it's more about occupants, and how many bikes would occupants have in a 2-bedroom apartment, let's say. And of course, not everybody in the housing project would have bikes, but we do want to allow that those who want to have bikes have access to a safe storage space. Otherwise, we're kind of pushing people back into car dependency. Where are they going to store their cars? They're going to store their cars on the street, and we want to avoid that. I think that's really the big crux of it for me. And then encouraging active transportation and our climate goals. You know, it's part of all, it all goes together for me. You know, in our ordinance, we don't define secure parking very well. You know, I think we have to have much better guidelines or recommendations or requirements for that. You know, if your bike's stolen, you might replace it once. You're not going to probably replace it twice. So if the secure storage area is not working, it's more than useless. You know, it's you know, there are various ways to think about it. Maybe no access directly onto the public right-of-way. Maybe going through an internal public space and then into the bike storage area. That's what the 1600 Solano was proposing. Go through their lobby, first a key into the lobby, then a key into the bike storage area. So it's multiple layers of security. Cameras would help. And not having it visible so thieves can't see it. I mean, if thieves see it, it's a magnet for theft. I mean, the same thing goes for outdoor parking. You know, and rooms are more secure. Even chain link is not secure. Unfortunately, with battery-powered metal grinders, you can cut through chain link in about 30 seconds. So, you know, somehow solid walls and better protection are good. You know, in a lot of places, there are bike maintenance areas in the storage rooms as a way to help people fix their bikes when they need minor maintenance or service them. Storage for cargo bikes is key, a higher percentage of spaces. We don't have any distinction of that except for the San Pablo specific plan area. And at 20% for cargo bikes, you know, it's a good starting place, but whatever we have with that specific plan, it should be citywide, and I don't know if we can retroactively go back and apply higher standards to the specific plan. But, you know, whatever we have should apply citywide. I'm certain of that. You know, as to whether 20% is the right mix, I think that's hard to say, probably. I don't know how we determine that, or if there's some way to figure that out or do research for that, but I would generally think a higher percentage would be warranted than even 20%. And then as far as charging outlets, most cargo bikes are electric, and then there are a lot of other bikes that are electric. So having 20% of the spaces serviced by electrical outlets seems too low. You know, and electrical outlets are pretty easy to put in, and it's just a 120 outlet. Could be required throughout the bike parking area without too much difficulty. The other thing is that we need space standards, access standards, accessibility standards. My favorite example is the Albany Bowl project where, you know, they did a great job on the multi-story building, their bike rooms, but in their townhouses, they were reminded that they were supposed to provide a bike parking spot in the townhouses as well, and they put them in the garage in a space blocked by the car. So if you want to get your bike and you are using your garage for a car, you got to back your car out, get your bike out. So we have to have language in there about completely unobstructed, clear passageway to the exterior from the bike storage area. And the same thing goes from within, you know, circulation within the bike storage area. There has to be enough room to back bikes out and get down an aisle and get out without blocked in. Cargo bikes are 7 feet, some of them. So imagine you're maneuvering a 7-foot cargo bike. You need a big backup space. So you know, Emeryville has some good physical space standards. You know, and there are just some simple graphic examples in there. And then, you know, flat, easy, in and out, no stairs, obstacles, et cetera. You know, and then the type of bike racks is key. There's some, like people talk about the grid racks, they really don't work at all. You can't even fit a cargo bike or electric bike tire in there sometimes. So I think we should have standards for the types of racks, and some should just not be allowed. It's just where you have vertical bars, across a top bar, bottom bar, vertical bars, and some feet that stand. And it's a classic for putting your front wheel in there, locking your front wheel to the rack, and you come back and the rest of your bike is gone and your front wheel's locked to the bike stand. Or bikes get tipped over and your front wheel turns into a, you know, a taco. They call it tacoed. So those don't work at all. And part of my frustration with Foodie Land as a temporary event was that it wasn't our conditions, but we didn't really have any standards for this. And they did the grid racks. And one time I went out there and they had the grid racks and they had about 3 or 4 feet behind, or they had enough space for a bike and then about 3, 4 feet and then just cars parking with no barriers. So you had to go somehow between the cars to get to the racks. So, I mean, it was just like not at all working. And they had, you know, 40,000 visitors in a weekend, so you can imagine the climate impact, the car parking impact, the transit, or the, you know, the access road blocking on weekend events in our city. So the more we can promote bike parking, the more we can reduce that kind of impact on our streets as well, so less pollution, et cetera. You know, looking at all the commercial, retail, entertainment, in our current ordinance, we have 1 space for 1,500 square feet for every single use. I think that should be looked at with a little bit finer grain lens. And City of Davis, I mean, I don't think we have to make it overly complicated, but some uses could have less requirements, some more, but, you know, at least, you know, looking at it a little bit more carefully would be helpful. You know, there are professional organizations that have model standards. Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals has standards and guidelines. Commercial streets, you know, I do like the idea of bike corrals. It would be, you know, somebody's mentioning the daylighting zones, but I have a feeling those might be, daylighting zones are there for sight lines, so I'm not sure we can put bike corrals there if it's blocking the sight line to the corner, or if you have kids crossing the street or something. But if it's set back enough and it's low enough, it might be okay. You know, I just really think we need to kind of future-proof our housing stock for eventual shift to more bicycling and more active transportation. That's what I see as the most important thing. So, you know, there are a lot of details, little things here and there to work out, but I think it's really important we do this. It's really, you know, establishing this nexus between housing, active transportation, climate action. It's really important. And I've read that in cities, they've done studies more in Europe, but where there is more bike parking, people will bike more. You have a place to secure your bike, and it's safe, and it's there when you need it. So, yeah, there's some correlation between the amount of bike parking provided in housing units and how much people bike. So I think it's not trivial to do this. So if anyone else has any questions or thoughts or follow-up? Yeah, Commissioner Pilch?
Yeah, I do. So one thing I guess we haven't talked about is commercial area standards, where we don't have any either. We do require businesses to provide bike temporary or short-term spots, I believe. But when is that When is that required? Is it upon getting a new business license, or is it just building a new building?
It's new construction, major renovation, or change of use, but you didn't highlight a point, but I do want to mention that in this City of Albany, we do not, as a planning department, review business licenses. So unless there is a need for a new use for the change of use, we wouldn't be aware of the use change.
Yeah, so we have a lot of, it's been noted that we do have a lot of bike racks out there, but a lot of them have been provided through a partnership with Albany Strollers and Rollers and the businesses, but that's only when the business wants to have that partnership. So where those bike racks are is a little bit scattershot. It's, there's no real plan for it. So a plan for the commercial area would be a great thing to have, or at least a vision for what we want, what are our minimum standards for commercial areas or retail areas. As far as bike corrals in the 20-foot zone, they do tend to be not block sight lines, I would think. But it's a good point. It should be looked into whether or not bike corrals can be put in those areas. That would be a great use of that 20-foot space. Then I have some questions for some of the commissioners. You mentioned Commissioner whose last name I'm forgetting. I'm so sorry.
Pearson.
Pearson, thank you. Eileen, that you use shared parking in Berkeley? Did you say that?
Yeah, I park at the bike station.
Okay, gotcha. And then,
But the TransLink is right next door, and I can use that too if I need 24-hour parking.
okay, great. You also mentioned that you thought outreach was important. Can you say more about what you think that outreach should look like, or specifically?
Well, I think that staff can do a survey, a community survey, to understand what the residents and visitors and employees want and need, where they think that the bike parking facilities meet their needs or don't meet their needs. It's great to get feedback from these 5 people, but we don't speak for the city.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate it. Just to follow up on something else you said about you kind of addressed just right now something you were saying, which is how well are we doing today? So surveying can help elucidate that a little bit. You also mentioned what problems we're trying to solve, and I think that Commissioner or Chair mentioned that in that we want to address climate change. We want to have mode shift. We want to get people away from motor vehicles and into micromobility. And I also believe, as our chair does, that it makes for a better community, makes for a better city. So it is about encouragement. I do agree with the chair that we want to have enough that it's attractive to people. They see that there's enough bike parking spaces wherever they need to go, so then they realize, oh, this is even better than motor vehicle parking. I don't have to worry about where I park, where I go, and that can encourage this mode shift as well. As far as I know that we worry a little bit about providing or asking requirements of developers and builders, but it wasn't too long ago that we required 2 motor vehicle parking spaces per residential unit in the city, and thank goodness that is no longer the case. And it would seem to me that building bicycle parking spots are got to be order of magnitude cheaper than motor vehicle parking spots. So a requirement for bicycle parking spots is not nearly as bad as what developers used to look at with motor vehicle parking spots. So I'm not as worried about that. And then finally, I would say that in terms of Solano Avenue, yeah, we should be at least up to, so I think we tried to up our game with the Solano Avenue specific plan. So yeah, we should definitely at least get to that level with whatever we're doing, and then hopefully maybe even more. We should look to what the other, one of the things we also should be doing is looking to the other cities and looking to standards like you mentioned from organizations, and also what Bike East Bay is coming up with. And finally, and maybe this is well, I guess it's not a question to be answered by staff right now, but if we do want to, if it's not the commission's pleasure to require like individual secured spaces for long-term parking for residential, say, if we don't want to go down that route, are there any incentives we can provide developers who go that route over, say, a bike room that might maybe incentivize them to provide even better, more secure, safer individual parking? Somebody to think about if there's any mechanism in our code for doing that. I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Any other feedback or no? I would mention I did send to staff some guidelines that Oakland and San Francisco have for temporary events, so we could look at those as well. You know, sort of numbers of potential participants, numbers of spaces projected, you know, Solano Stroll. Ken, do you have a discussion? No, do you have something? I mean, it's a discussion. Why don't you give us some feedback?
Beg your forgiveness. There's been some topics that have come up since I commented, and just a couple quick things. You know, Commissioner Pilch, I think the idea of a bike room in a multifamily residential is a lot more flexible than having individual.
Excuse me, I'm going to ask you to actually open the public hearing again, and if you open it, I think we should offer that opportunity to the people online as well.
Okay. We'll open it to public comment for one more round. We have one participant in the room. If there's anyone online who would like to comment, please raise 3 minutes. Yeah, that's fine. Please raise your hand. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. I do want to do it correctly. So a bike room or a series of bike rooms could be a lot more flexible, especially since you have some families that might have a lot more bikes and some with a few bikes. Typically, people with higher-end bikes might bring those into their unit. You give some flexibility to what can happen in the location, whereas individual bike cupboards would be somewhat burdensome, I would think. I came up with a longer list for you of longer bikes: cargo, trailer, trailer bike, tandems, and they're developing as we speak. I think you've zeroed in on the fact that one size doesn't necessarily fit all. Flexibility is good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there's anyone online who would like to speak, please raise your hand.
No hands. And I just want to remind everyone that they are welcome to email us further specifics or additional thoughts to, you can mail them directly to staff, to Ben B. Metla at albanyca.org, Al Mendez at albanyca.org, or directly to the Planning and Zoning Commission, or to all three of us.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we'll close public comment again, unless there are any other comments. Staff, do you feel like you have enough feedback or enough direction?
I think we're good. Thank
Okay,
you.
well, thank you very much. Then we will close item 5-1 and go to item 6-1, 2024 Annual Progress Report of our housing element. So staff, please go ahead.
Yes, good evening. I'm Leslie Mendez, the Building and Planning Manager for the city. And first of all, I want to thank you all, especially those who looked at the packet a little early. I guess I had a bit of a hectic week last week, so thank you. I think I got it in pretty good order, and by the time it goes to City Council, it will be perfect. So this is an informational item only with no action required on the part of the commission. And it is a summary of this year's, or I should say last year's 2024, the City of Albany's annual progress report, or the APR. And the APR tracks the city's status and progress in implementing its housing element. And it's due every year by April 1st to the California Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD. So I sent you an attachment of the housing element, and as you can see, it was not very legible. I was trying to see if there was a way to get the actual spreadsheet to you all, and I couldn't figure it out, so sorry. Anyway, in 2004, the city did receive a total of 19 housing development applications. All of those were ADUs, so we continue to see a little slowdown. I have hope that that is going to turn around very soon. We issued 12 building permits for ADUs, and additionally, we saw the completion / certificate of occupancy of 10 new units, 9 of those which were ADUs, and 1 was a single-family home. So HCD tracks housing affordability metrics based on the date of building permit issuance. And just so you know, following discussions between HCD and the Association of Bay Area Governments, it was decided that for last year and for this year, if we didn't have actual information on the affordability or projected affordability for ADUs, we could use the 30-30-30-10 formula, which we took advantage of, which is 30% at very low income, 30 at low income, 30 at moderate income, and 10 for above income. So based on that, we had randomly assigned that, and so how they progressed through, we had 4 come in at very low income, 6 at low income, and 2 at moderate income for this year. Last year, we did report them all as moderate income, and I'm actually going to go and see if we can revise last APR to take advantage of those numbers. And just for everyone's knowledge, I'm sorry, I have my. Oh, here we go. The AMI, the area median income for Alameda County last year was $155,700 for a family of 4, and that so that's what applied this year. The new AMIs were released, and it's gone up to $159,800 for a family of 4. So the 6th cycle regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA, extends from 2023 to 2031, and calendar year 2024 is the second year that our building permits are counting towards this RHNA cycle. So this table shows our current process of RHNA. The projection period was populated by HCD. And that covered the period of June 20th of 2022 to January 30th, 2030. So 2023, excuse me. So currently, as you can see, we still have 1,600 units to fill. But, slowly, surely, we're working towards it, so we'll get there. And finally, Table D of the APR tracks housing element progress for all the programs that we've adopted. So there is an update on all of them. However, I just wanted to highlight a few notable accomplishments for 2024. First is code enforcement. Our program was to develop more proactive building and housing enforcement programs. Last year, we issued an RFP, and we selected a consultant to start up our code enforcement program that includes our multifamily rental substandard housing inspections as well. So that has started this year, but last year we signed in with the contract. Next is our density bonus ordinance. We had a program to both educate, but as well as eliminate the need for density bonus projects to go to the city council. So you all reviewed that last year and gave recommendation, and that was approved by city council. Subsequent to the update of the ordinance, which also updated for conformance with state law, we now have our density bonus informational handout online to hopefully make it less scary for folks. Next, removal of impediments to fair housing is to implement the recommendations of the AI analysis of impediments to fair housing as part of the county-wide plan. So that is ongoing, but I do want to say that the City of Albany was an active participant in the updated analysis of impediments to fair housing with the Alameda County Collaborative Cities and County, and that was released last year. So last month, excuse me. So the final draft was released last month, so it's available for you all to view. And then the last two programs that I'm highlighting are the rent review, was looking at our current rent review program and see if there's updates or changes that could be made to further protect tenants. And 5D is related to tenant protections. Last year we did initiate and establish the Housing Advisory Commission, and it was fully seated. Although the work is really commencing this year, we got it going last year, so that is another success. And that concludes my presentation, but I am here if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Do any commissioners have any questions for staff? Commissioner Pilch?
Yes, if we could we put up the arena progress slide again?
Sure. I have a blank screen. Hold on. Strange.
I think you want to step back through the slides.
Pardon?
I think if you hit the back button, you'll go backwards through the slides.
Well, I shut it. Hold on, let me close that. It just.
I think they're toggling between different screens.
Let's try this again. Okay.
Okay, great, thank you. So does the units to date align with the projection period? Is that units to date, is that the same period as the projection period or different period?
The projection period was the year before 2022, ended in 2022. Maybe I'm not understanding your question. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just wondering if we should compare our progress by looking at the projection period and comparing it to units to date.
Oh, I see. Well, the projection period includes the units to date, but in terms of comparison, it's best to compare last year and this year, since those are based on actual building permits issued. Projections are based on the projections of the housing element that HCD enters. Not quite sure. Maybe one of you knows how they come up with those numbers, but yeah.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm looking for is an idea about, I assume we're behind in meeting our goals.
We are. I think every city is. I think
Yeah.
the RENA goals are
Right.
pie in the sky, but it's
Yeah,
you know,
no,
are
understood.
there.
I'm not trying to cast aspersion on
Yeah, yeah.
about that, but I'm just wanting to get a sense by how much we're behind.
So you can see that in that last column. So we are 272, well, behind, we don't really have it per year. So I guess we could have divided it by year and say, so we still need 272 very low income, 143 low income, you know, 148 moderate, and 453 above moderate. So
And remind me the end of the period, what year is that?
it's 2031, yes.
2031?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
So-
All right, that gives me a little, that helps me. All right, thank you very much.
Okay. If you wish to entertain questions or comments, we do have someone raising their hand from the,
Okay, well, let's see if there are any more questions for
Yep.
staff. Anyone else have questions for staff on this?
What is the status of some of those large projects we approved in the last 2 years?
well, I'm not sure we've done anything, any large projects since the last 2 years, because I've been
Right,
here
that's
for
what
2
I'm
years.
talking
So
about.
I will tell you that the Albany Bowl project is moving forward. We're keeping our fingers crossed. Their goal is to actually pull building permits before the end of this year. So that will be significant. And so, yes. So what you will be seeing in the next couple, like hopefully before the August recess is we have the public art requirement that is required to go to the Planning Commission after it goes to the Art Committee. So I am working with the applicant team to try to get that through before the August recess. So fingers crossed on that. The Solano project is still on hold. This is the one we hear about. So have reached out. Both of those projects have extended expiry dates due to state law extending expiries to 18 months. I can't remember the number of the bill. So that still has about a year and a half. I don't have but so we still are hopeful about that one, but it's not quite as active at the moment.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. Yeah, there was another project on Evelyn that was fairly, I mean, not a big one, but that one's not coming. Pardon? I think way, yeah, we're by, yeah. We approved that a long time ago.
I don't know about it, which means I think it may have died. The other one I should mention, it's not quite as large as the 3-unit development on Adams Street that you all approved, I think, maybe a year and a half ago. So it's 3 kind of townhomes, just, you can walk there. So they have also applied for a building permit, so
Okay.
moving that one through as well.
Okay, any other questions? And not, then we'll just go to public comment. Anyone would like to comment online, please raise your hand. Brian Martin, please go ahead.
If you can unmute.
Yes, hi, thank you, sorry. I had a couple of quick questions, clarifications. One is, maybe these were answered in the presentation, but I didn't notice. Is the Cleveland Saha project, what year was that completed? When did people move into that? And when will those numbers show up if they haven't already? Another one is, for ADUs, I think you said pretty much everything in 2023 and 2024, new housing was ADUs, and but you assign them to different income levels. And my understanding is, had an ADU built in our backyard a few years ago, was that owners can set the rent to whatever they want, and there's no restrictions like there are on like large developments that have density bonus rules that say it has to be below market rate, so where did those low income, very low income kind of designations come from for ADUs, since I think they're all market rent? Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any other online comments?
Anyone else wishing to speak, please use the raise the hand icon. No. And if you like, I can answer those
Okay,
questions.
we'll close public comment and staff could answer the question. I guess it was about how those values were assigned when there's no actual corresponding.
Right, so
actual
first let
rent
me,
data, or-
yeah, there was also a question about the Saha units, and those were, the building permits were issued, I believe it was before the last 2 years, I'm not sure when. The certificate of occupancy will be reflected on 2025 APR, so that will be bolstering our numbers a bit as well. So that was a great question. I know we kept going, where are those Saha numbers? And then, as you all know, we're unable to include the recent development in University Village, which would have been helpful too. So as to the ADU affordability, so I did explain, but it may be a little confusing. Previously, many jurisdictions, and this is what we did last year, were under the assumption and kind of was authorized to kind of have them as moderate income. And the thought behind it is that they were affordable by design, not that they were deed restricted in any way. We do not require deed restrictions or affordability levels for ADUs. As I mentioned, it was agreed upon by ABAG and HCD that we could use this 30-30-30-10, 30-30-30-10, yes, rule this year to assign 30% at extremely low, 30 at very low, and 30 at low. Wait, I think I have that wrong. But to divide the affordability up by that formula, again, it's just through this year, so we're taking advantage of it. And a lot of that, again, is behind. I mean, some ADUs aren't used as housing at all. They're people's offices, but they may have no rent. People graduated children or grandparents who are not being charged rent. So officially, that is housing, and that would be extremely low. It could be extremely low. So that is the thought about it, not necessarily that we have set rent caps on it that are monitored by the city, but just by the affordability by design and the types of folks who would be inhabiting, types of households that are inhabiting those. So we did take advantage of that. So that's how we got the distribution of income level.
And those designations are permanent, and those will stay in our categories all the way through? Or?
They stay in our category for RENA, but to also maybe expand further, that in no way means that one of the ones that's limited, marked as extremely low has to charge an extremely low income. So it's a reflection, but maybe not a accurate depiction.
Okay, any other comments or discussion by commissioners or? Pilch?
Yeah, so thanks for the presentation. I think we should continue to consider whether or not, I know that building has been tough in the past few years, and I know that the projects elsewhere have also not advanced. But when I do look around to my surrounding communities like Berkeley, Oakland, and even El Cerrito for a little bit, I do see some building going on. So I think we should continue to ask ourselves if our code is good enough to spur the housing building that we need to do, or whether or not we need to do more, and things like a Solano Avenue specific plan. I think already is mentioned at City Council that considering changing single-family zoning as well. So as we look at these numbers, I think we should keep that in mind. Thank you.
Other comments? Well, I had a few things. I was looking through all our programs, and there's still a lot we're obligated to do in terms of zoning, mostly. Measure K, raising our density there, trying to get a ballot measure. Also, let's see, Program 2B, revising Measure K. Program 4A, modifications to zoning standards. there's still a lot we can do, and Program 40, Solano Commercial Standards, I think that's kind of the key one for me, or all those things are where we could raise our density levels and push, for more housing in those areas. So making progress on those for me is really critical. And I know the ballot measures are probably tricky. It takes time to present them or prepare them, and I don't know, a lot of that is under council's direction, correct?
Correct.
So not ours. So I guess I would encourage council to get on the ball with those, because those are opportunities that we could take advantage of, and opportunities that could be missed if some other lower density proposals come in the meantime. So really would encourage council to move forward with some of that, and I don't know if that's dependent on your time or staff.
I believe it's Measure K that it has, K is the,
Albany Hill.
yes, so that's, no, never mind, it's the other measure that limits zoning. And there are a city with too many measures limiting our zoning. So there's still, at least in departmental-wise, I think they're still very important to move forward, and hopefully we can get council to move forward on those as well, so.
Okay, and then, the other key one for me is the Solano Commercial District. We're per our housing element, we are supposed to be spreading development around the city, not just San Pablo Avenue. So Solano is the perfect location for infill housing in, almost all respects, except for the small lot size. But barring that, I was thinking, and part of our housing element calls for upgrading or upzoning or, making it possible to create more density. So, I was just wondering how we go about that, and if it's a specific plan, that would be great, or just other independent zoning measures. FAR seems to be a constant problem for creating more density. I think we should look at FAR and just get rid of it. Nobody's convinced me why we need it anymore. It was in the past to restrict the actual size of the buildings within the envelope and not make it even possible to build out to the envelope. So that is an obstacle to housing still. And so, some way of moving forward on Solano, I would really appreciate it, somehow. Because I don't think our current standards at, 3 stories, 35 feet, it's barely 3 stories, is not going to be conducive. When you have small lots, the only way to increase density is to go up, right? Cannot go wider. So, raising the height limits, the density standard is already pretty high, but the FAR limits it. So I think we have work to do on Solano Avenue as well. So that's all I have on that, but if we have other comments, unless there's other comments, we can go ahead. Let's see, what do we have else? Any announcements or?
I just have many announcements. One's kind of with the next meeting. We will have a meeting, May 28th. It will be a short meeting, 2 items, but it will be important to get them through. We will not be having a meeting the second Wednesday in June or the second Wednesday in July. So for June and July, just for your planning purposes, if you want to go to Hawaii, do it. I know Commissioner Waddy will be out at the next meeting, so please keep me informed of anyone else, just so we can keep apprised of the quorum. The other thing, it's not maybe as exciting as the Solano plan, but what you will be seeing sooner rather than later, and again, hopefully prior to the August recess as a first touch, is the housing element program related to care facilities and group homes, and we're also just updating our ordinance on large family daycares as part of that. So we, one of these that we were hope that we can just do it super quick, and so that will be coming shortly.
Okay, if that's it, then we'll call this meeting adjourned.
Great, thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our attendees.